Who's the hairiest of them all? Is it me? Oh, nerds, welcome back. I'm Tyler. As you saw in the intro, I built a really cool foldable workbench that goes up against the wall, and I used a neat hoist and latch system that I came up with to kind of keep you out of harm's way while it's being hoisted up there. A couple things about this bench: it's got a melamine top, really good for cleanup, and T-track embedded in the top, as well as the edge banding on 3 of the sides. I built this so I can add accessories here and there for things, maybe some cowls, some clamping solutions, maybe like some right angle brackets or something like that. So consider subscribing, because going forward, I'm gonna be building a lot of those accessories to make things easier for both of us as we go through projects. But if you wanna hang around after the build, I'm gonna talk about things that I screwed up on and ways for you to avoid the screw ups that I encountered, as well as tools that I used during this build that were really worth their weight in gold. So let's go ahead and dive in. Started with my circular saw and my Craig rip cut guide and knocked a hunk off of this melamine. It'll help keep the weight down a little bit and dimension it a little bit better so that I could use 8-foot long pieces for the edge banding. I set up a stop block and cut all of my lumber out, and I'll have my cut list in the description. Following that, I'm figuring out where I want to mark my center hole for the legs. I have this neat little tool, I'll put it in the description below, but this will give you a nice rounded edge, perfect rounded edge. And if you don't have something like that, you could use string. It's not a perfect solution, but it'll help. Gluing up the legs here, I'm laminating them. Interesting fact, laminated 2x4s is stronger than a 4x4 piece of wood. So I just put some Titebond 2 in there, I clamped it together, I pre-drilled and then added 3 screws to hold it all together and let it dry overnight. Once dry, I used that tool and finished off all the rounded edges. I added some straight lines here, and this will kind of help guide you as you go to cut this through the miter saw. And some of these cuts can get kind of sketchy, so if you end up with a pretty sharp edge like this, don't be afraid to use a belt sander to finish it off and kind of round everything up. This is a nice little step, that way you don't have to, I mean, like I said, some of those cuts can be a little dangerous. I'm lining up the aprons here, and I don't want to add any pocket screws where my T-track is going to be lying, so I have a little section here identifying that as a no screw zone. I hit my pocket holes, and now I'm using a little cart that I made for my planer. This is a neat little cart. If you guys haven't seen the video, go check it out. But I'm using this as a stand so that I can pull these freaking heavy sheets of melamine up here and then lay out all of my cuts so that I can start the frame portion of it. I'm going to be adding edge banding around here, and you'll see that in a second. So I decided on going 1-inch inset from the edge for my aprons. Make sure when you go to pocket hole these in or pocket screw them in that they're clamped down really, really well. The melamine's really slippery, it's going to want to move on you. So after screwing these in, I do this one big side apron, and then I do the second, like the shorter apron, and then I screw them all together using 3-inch screws. I drilled my hole using my little drill guide here, which is actually quite a bit of help, and then I set it up at a right angle to use that as a guide to drill through the apron, and then screw in my bolts and my washers. Don't forget to blow away the debris, it can set things off a little bit. But I used a washer and then 2 nuts on the end to kind of lock the second nut is to lock the first nut in place, a cool little trick. But it seems to work really well. I did the same thing for all 4 of the legs without really a problem. I'm going to be setting, this is used as a brake here. So basically what happens is, as soon as the legs are fully extended, it stops on the apron and it won't allow it to go anymore. So you go 90 degrees and then tap it in just a little bit, because the wood's going to want to flex. And once it flexes, it'll flex all the way out to that 90 degrees if you make it just acute of that. And see, here you go, a little bit of proof. And as you can tell, it did a really good job breaking it. I used a 2x4 as a spacer to add an extra stretcher here. This is going to be for support and, just keep everything as sturdy as possible. And you can tell I'm pleased.
I came up with an idea to use these strong ties as support for the center stretcher. I just clamped them so because they're kind of flexed out, so I clamped them so they would fit a 2x4 nice and snug, and then measured for center and mounted these suckers, and it worked really well. I'm going to clamp the center stretcher in place, of course, after I measured it and cut it and everything, so it fits nice and well. Make sure that everything's still square, and I'm going to use my drill guide to drill a hole straight through, and this is going to be for a knob and a threaded insert. Like I was saying, this is a pretty cool idea I thought of. One of the stronger ways to attach this center stretcher, and if you just thread the threaded insert in on that knob and then screw it all the way in, it'll thread nice and flush. It's one of the best ways to do it. And then I labeled so I knew which direction I mounted these originally. And as you can tell, it did a really great job. This is really strong, surprisingly actually, but with those threaded inserts and those knobs, it holds it basically like a screw. For the casters, I centered them and I drilled my holes, and I kind of went in at an angle towards the center because it barely fits.
Hey you guys, I hope you're enjoying the video. If you are, it would really be awesome if you could help me out. Drop a like, put a comment down below, even if it's just introducing yourself and sounding off from where you're at in the world. And then that subscribe button if you're interested in seeing more. If not, I completely understand. I do all this stuff for free. I'm not charging anybody anything. I try and answer every single comment, so any of that stuff really helps me out. I really appreciate you guys. Let's keep going.
The bench is basically done at this point. My buddy Jason came over to help me flip it over, so I didn't kill myself or ruin it in the process. We're going to go ahead and slide it off of this planer cart, flip it over, and then on each side pull the legs out, and it'll stand on its own. Following this, I ran the edge banding that I'm going to be using through my planer. You could also do this with a table saw, just be really careful. You need a flat, smooth edge to butt up against the edges of your melamine or plywood, whatever you use. So go ahead and put my planer away and then use the cart for my miter saw to cut my 45-degree angles. Make sure that you're measuring for the short side on these and cut for 45 degrees and you'll be set. Mine came out really great. So here I'm showing you use the short end. Also, when you go to mount this, keep a reminder of where your T-track's going to be, because you don't want any screws or nails there where your router might hit it. I went ahead and glued up these edge pieces and then hit that sucker with a bunch of nails. Again, keep that space in between the top and bottom brad nails so that your router bit can freely flow through there without hitting any. The edges of my top got a little screwed up, so I hit it with some caulk, but not really necessary. So this is the first time I've ever routed anything, and I did some practice runs, which obviously initially weren't that great. But after a few tries, I was able to get it down, and I felt comfortable enough to go full swing with this sucker. And you're going to want to do 3 passes. Do some research on how to use a router really well if you're not really familiar with it. I had to do a lot of research, and then some of that practice really helped me out. But this router was awesome, man. If you don't have one, you should definitely get one for projects. It's going to open up a whole new level of projects that I can complete. But another thing to keep in mind is it is dusty, dude. Look at this face. Covered me. Covered me. I still smell like dust. I took a piece of sandpaper, went through, and just sanded those edges down a little bit, and then test fit a lot of my T-track. Everything fit really, really tight, which was nice. I had to cut a piece. I used some painter's tape to collect any of the aluminum shavings. Your miter saw will make those cuts no problem. And then I hammered it all in place. And if you're going to be using small pieces, make sure that you use a small piece that has a hole for a screw. I went and pre-drilled and then screwed everything together, and bada beam, I've got T-track on the top, and I'm pumped about it. All right, so now I'm coming up with a mounting solution for this hoist. I'm going to use some scrap wood that I have, and I'm going to mount, this is a M8 1.25 by 50 bolt. That's the one that fits the threads, and I'm using a washer and a lock washer. You're going to have to figure this out yourself, which way you want to do this, but the way that I have this set up is probably going to be the strongest mounting solution, and I'll bore out a couple holes here so I can fit these bolts. But Go ahead and watch this and pay attention to how I set this up. I mark for center, and then I'm going to go ahead and drill out those mounting holes so the bolts can go through and reach that housing. And it's really nice actually to use the bench here and this T-track right off the bat. It's really handy, man. I'm excited about it. This T-track and these accessories actually were some of the cheapest and best I could find, so check the description for them. I go ahead and tighten the bolts down, and then I press on them to leave an indentation so I know where to bore some spaces out for those bolts to fit. I push the bench up against the wall, make some marks, check for some studs, and then this is where I'm going to be mounting a board for the bench to sit up against. And I test fit it here and kind of pull on it just to make sure it feels right. I added a second board on top of this one, stacking it so it stuck out from the wall a little bit further. And I measured my bench top to see how far I would have to mount these top holes. And watch out, Bob. I'm not messing with you today. So I measured that out, and this is where I'm starting my mounting portion for the hoist. I've got that bottom one on there, and as I like to just try a little sorry pull-up test, make sure it holds this gut. I'm going to go ahead and clamp the other 2x4 using the spacers, and then screw those suckers in. And as you can see here, it fits nice. I'm going to put the hoist up here and use these clamps to help hold it in place while I screw in probably about 15 screws or so. I'm going to be using this sweet ring to hold the load. It holds up to 400 pounds. And then these brackets are going to save my edge banding from getting marred up. Behind this ring and behind the apron, I'm going to put a block to kind of help disperse that weight. So I drill my holes, I use that drill guide, I tighten everything down, and then I have to whack the ends off of these brackets so they don't sit proud of the edge banding and, you know, scratch up crap. You know what I'm talking about. So I go ahead and test everything out, and it was obvious that it was dangerous to crawl up under behind this center stretcher and then try and latch anything in. So I'm gonna have to come up with a different solution and actually order some parts. While I'm waiting for those, I take that sucker outside and route my edge banding for T-track. Again, 3 passes for each spot, and dude, it came out great. A little tip though, make sure that you leave a space in the front and back so that your accessories can slide in and out easily. So pumped about this, and here's a little power strip accessory that I made to keep your cords out of the way. Now, while I'm screwing in some of this T-track, this never happened, so I figured I'd show it off. My freaking bit broke, and this is why I always wear eye protection. Last thing you want is a bit flying at your cornea. My spring-loaded latches came in, and all I did was use some eye bolts and some paracord on both sides, and a little wooden handle to kind of activate that latch. I'm actually really excited about this. I'm pretty proud. I showed my dad probably 50 times. But this thing works perfectly, man. Let's go ahead and undo this center stretcher, fold these legs in, and head it back to the shop. Peace.
And that's it. Like I was telling you guys before, this is a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. With that being said, let's talk about some of the things that I did screw up on. The very first one is a little heartbreaking to me, where the pocket hole screws came through the top in 4 locations. And it might be because I'm using pine here, there might have been a soft spot and the screw pulled through a little bit more than it should have. But if I was to recommend something to you, back the collar out of that drill bit for the pocket holes just a 1/16 of an inch, and you should be good and not have any issues. The way that I fixed it was I used a little bit of CA glue and I put a piece of wax paper down, and then I used a C-clamp and just clamped the crap out of it after I backed the screw out a little bit, and it made it flush. At least you could still see the crack, but it's flush. I shouldn't have any issues. The second thing that I screwed up on was routing, and full disclosure, this is the first time I ever routed anything. I practiced before this, but this was my first project using a router. So if you're nervous about getting a router, don't be. We'll talk more about it in the tool section, but don't be, because I only screwed up on one spot, and it was because I was being stupid. So routing this edge banding, this one right here, and I'm done. I made my pass, and I'm waiting for the bit to stop spinning, and my shoulders and my back were on fire, and I had to pull it out. And when I pulled it out, I gouged it a little bit. So just don't do that. Wait till the bit stops spinning and you'll be good. The very last thing that I screwed up on, and this was unavoidable for me, was the edges of the melamine I screwed up in transportation. They're heavy, man. Each sheet is like 75 pounds, and me manipulating it around the garage and in the bed of my truck, the edges aren't perfect. It's a little bit chipped out. And you know, it's gonna happen anyways. I mean, I shouldn't be crying about it, but again, I really want it to look perfect when I started, but it's a workbench. It's gonna get screwed up eventually. But with that being said, thank you, Jason, my buddy who helped me flip this thing around. This thing would have been ruined if I tried to do that myself. And thanks to the guy at Lowe's who, not an employee, just some random friend that showed up and helped me pick the sheets out and put it on my cart. So thank you, man. I appreciate that if you're watching this video. If you're gonna be doing this and you don't have somebody to help, maybe consider doing with 3/4 inch plywood and don't use the melamine. 3/4 inch plywood's like 65 pounds a sheet, and it's stronger, it's not gonna get damaged as easily, and you can shellac the crap out of it, and it'll still, like wood glue and stuff will be easier to clean up. If I was gonna redo this, I probably would do 3/4 inch plywood. But let's go ahead and jump into the VIP tool section. As we jump into this, I just want to take a second and say I'm not sponsored by any of these companies. As a matter of fact, Bosch wouldn't even return my messages. So these are all my individual thoughts on my use with these items. So this is the VIP tool section. This is a section that I try and do in some of my bigger builds that tools that I might recommend that you have for the build, things that are gonna help you out, things that I really found valuable. This right here was the VIP for me. I got a package that has the plunge base, which is this one, which lifts and lowers, which is pretty cool, and a fixed base, and it also came with this edge guide. And so the edge guide is what I used to choose a depth, and then it guides along the edge and keeps it nice and straight. And these bits were really nice too. It took me a little while to be able to find the right one. This one is awesome. But when it came to being able to also plunge, this is the one that you want, and I'll leave descriptions for all this stuff below. Another really cool tool that was really cheap actually, and I'm surprised I haven't got one of these earlier, is this little drill guide. And all you do is you clamp this on, and this will help you get, it's not gonna be the same as having a drill press. It moves around, it's not perfect, but it's a great solution for trying to get a straight hole with your drill bits. And I use this on the legs specifically to make sure that that bolt that is used for pivoting or folding those legs up and down was straight. So this was really handy. And actually I saw this in another guy's build who did a folding workbench like this too. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, man, but I'll link his video down below also. There's a couple of different videos like this. The first one that I saw was about 4 years ago, and that was the one that inspired me. But recently I checked out some of the other ones to see if there was something I might be missing, and this guy had a cool solution for those. So I'll link his video down below. Go ahead and check that one out. This Craig rip cut guide is awesome also, and this would be something that you probably could use to cut T-track if you just wanted to use your circular saw. It's not gonna be as fine, in my opinion, as a solution as using the router, but this also helped me dimension my melamine to the right length, because I, again, couldn't get this up onto a table saw to do a rip cut. So this is awesome, this Craig rip cut, and it's only like 30 bucks or something like that. These guys, I keep finding great uses for these. They keep on giving me right angles and hold things in places along with clamps and stuff just to get the job done. So these, you guys, there's no excuse not to have these. They're super cheap and they're gonna freaking help you out, I promise. So check these out also. Here's one too. This isn't exactly a tool, but you know, hours and hours in the shop, it is nice to jam out. And I know a lot of people have like an actual stereo system, but I use this around the shop while I'm building things. I take it with me places. I use this in the bathroom while I'm taking a shower and just jam out. So if you guys don't have one of these, it's waterproof. It's super legit, pretty cheap too. Just a fun little addition to all the tools that I keep in my shop, just something to lighten the mood a little bit. Oh, and the very, very last one is that hoist. That hoist is awesome. I'm really, really happy with that. It keeps me out from under the workbench as it's getting lifted up. If I was halfway or 3/4 way up and I you know, kinked my back or my shoulder went out or something, you can be in a really dangerous situation under, you know, around 200-pound chunk of wood. So that keeps you out of the way. All you got to do is lift those latches and push it that extra couple inches, but it's already tethered at that point. So that hoist, awesome solution. I'm gonna keep trying to build things with that kind of mentality, not just for safety, but kind of like an automation deal. I don't want to have to use my back or my legs or my shoulders to put something up. I want to be able to use a tool to do that for me. That's what all this crap's for. But that's really it for the VIP tool section. If you're still watching, let me just take a second and thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me, building along with me. Again, if you can help the channel out by dropping a like, subscribing, hitting that bell notification icon, sharing, all of that stuff really helps and it doesn't cost you anything. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. Watch some of my other builds if you're interested, and I'll see you guys next time.